Across the vast expanse of time, mythologies have forged the world. From the depths of chaos to the flames of distant realms, every culture has woven tales of gods, heroes, and celestial wonders. Welcome to Myth to Myth, your mythological portal. Subscribe for more epic journeys. Visit mythtomyth.com and discover all our products. After the fires of Prometheus's defiance and Pandora's jar closed upon our last episode, the air of Olympus thickened with a different tension. Mortals now endure toil and disease. Hope clings like a fragile ember in the darkness. The gods, too, face new challenges, not from chains or jars, but from hearts. This is not a war of steel or stone. It is a contest between vow and desire. When Zeus sought to cement his rule, he did not lift the thunderbolt. He offered his hand. He pursued Hera, the stern and regal daughter of Rhea, not merely as a lover, but as an equal whose sovereignty he craved. Their union would shape the cosmos, sprout golden fruit, and awaken jealous storms that would ripple through continents. In Argive groves, a cold bird shivered under Hera's cloak. In the deep west, a tree would bloom with glowing apples. Farther afield, a priestess would become a cow and traverse the edge of the world, while a princess would ride a bull across the sea. This episode is a tapestry of sacred marriage and seething betrayal. Love crowns a queen, yet suspicion births wanderings and wars. Through it all, the gods remain bound by prophecy. Order demands union, but union invites chaos. Sit by the hearth as we turn the page to the wedding of Zeus and Hera. The storm of jealousy begins with a single wingbeat. Hera often wandered alone through wooded hills and rivers, her noble bearing cloaked in solitude. She was Rhea's third daughter, majestic and strict, guardian of marriage before she herself had tasted its bonds. One spring, as flowers of asphodel opened and bees drank, she lingered near the banks of the river Imbrasos on Samos, sanctuary of her youth. Grey clouds hung low, whispering of rain. From the branches of an oak, a small, trembling cuckoo fluttered down. Its feathers were drenched, its tiny body shivered. Compassion, not curiosity, moved Hera to gather it into her mantle. She pressed the bird to her breast to warm it, the way a mother might shield a child from storm. In that gesture, a trap was sprung. The cuckoo's eyes glinted with uncanny knowledge. As Hera's fingers stroked the creature's damp feathers, a surge of heat pulsed through its body. The little beak opened, not to chirp, but to laugh in a low, thunderous tone. In a blink, feathers vanished. Flesh and feathers dissolved into a broad chest, dark curls and familiar eyes. Hera gasped as the king of gods knelt at her feet, his mantle of storm clouds slipping from his shoulders like mist. "Forgive my deception," Zeus said, breath scented with lightning. "It is the only way I could approach you without being shunned." Hera's face burned with indignation and awe. She had spurned him before, preferring independence to his roving affections. Yet the image of him shivering in the rain had broken her guard. She lifted the cloak from his shoulders, discovering her own heart stirred by pity and anger. Compassion turned to obligation. Zeus, cunning even in courtship, had pierced the goddess's resolve by feigning weakness. Hera did not smile. She listened as he spoke of unity and shared thrones, of a kingdom that would no longer be divided by bachelor desires. The air thickened with unspoken choice. Rain began to fall in earnest, hiding tears she would never admit she shed. Zeus rose, no longer hiding behind feathers, his voice no longer small and timid, but a rolling echo that filled the grove. "Daughter of Cronus," he intoned, "sister to my storm, keeper of vows, marry me. Together, we will rule not by hunger alone, but by law and harmony." The drizzle turned to sheets of rain, each drop a drumbeat on leaves and stone. Hera's first impulse was fury. She had nurtured the helpless creature out of pure mercy. Now her mercy had been used as a lever against her will. She straightened, spine stiff, eyes flashing with the light of broken trust. "You who devoured vows with the same hunger with which you devoured your father's words, why should I believe you will cherish mine?" she asked. her voice carrying the winter wind's edge. Zeus, surprisingly, did not thunder back. He knelt, head bowed, hands open. He spoke not of desire, but of balance. He admitted his wandering lust and promised to bind his fate to hers with an oath no thunderbolt could break. He told her that a ruler without a queen would leave Olympus vulnerable to rebellion and chaos. He confessed that he did not seek merely her beauty, but her wisdom, her sense of law, her ability to restrain the storm within him. Hera's anger softened, though it did not melt. Compassion stirred again beneath her steely gaze. She saw his vulnerability, a need for order disguised as a plea for love. In that moment, the goddess who safeguarded marriage recognized a chance to shape the highest union in existence. "If I accept," she said slowly, measuring each word, "you will honor me in all ways. You will not mock my position, nor invite others to sit on my throne." Zeus nodded, a solemn vow passing between them. "So be it," Hera whispered, though doubt flitted like a sparrow in her heart. In this bargain, she saw her own future, glory and grief entwined. After the moment in Samos, Zeus did not immediately claim Hera's hand. The goddess demanded proper courtship, not a conquest disguised as gratitude. He obliged, altering his approach. Instead of disguises, he sent tokens and signs. He guided rain clouds to water her sacred oak groves. He commanded spring breezes to carry fragrances of lilies and myrrh across her temple. He called upon Iris, messenger of the gods, to deliver jewels carved from stardust, not as bribes, but as symbols of respect. Sometimes he visited not as a lover, but as a companion, wandering with her across meadows and mountains. They spoke of law and cosmos, of prophecies woven by Gaia and the warnings of their mother Rhea. Hera listened as Zeus, usually so quick to act, wrestled with his own impatience. She tested his constancy by asking questions about governance, justice, and fidelity. She urged him to prove that his thunderbolts could become tools of protection, not merely weapons of seduction. In these weeks, Hera discovered that Zeus could be gentle when he chose. His laughter, though still rolling like distant thunder, softened. He admitted mistakes he had made with other nymphs and muses, though he excused them as necessary for creating heroes and demigods. Hera argued with him, her sharp wit matching his cunning. He learned to value her perspective, to admire the way she weighed the consequences of actions before she acted. One day, while walking along the banks of the river Asopus, Zeus plucked a golden daffodil and offered it to her. "It is nothing compared to what Gaia will offer you," he said, hinting at a gift that would change the cosmic orchard. Hera accepted the flower, twisting its stem between her fingers. For the first time she smiled, not for the gift, but for the promise of shared rule. Yet a shadow lingered behind that smile. She knew Zeus's nature. To bind him was to wage war against wind and rain themselves. Courtship across the skies was as much negotiation as romance. Each step was measured, each word a pebble in the foundation of an empire. By the time the stars of Orion began their winter ascent, Hera had reached her decision. The cosmos itself seemed to pause, listening for her answer. Zeus met her on the heights of Mount Cithaeron, where eagles circled and pine trees whispered old songs. No disguises cloaked him. No storm accompanied him. He stood bareheaded, his hair curling in the wind, his eyes earnest and unshielded. Hera approached, carrying a veil woven by her own hands. It was embroidered with scenes of creation, Gaia rising from chaos, Uranus being cut down, Cronus devouring the stone-swaddled child. It was a tapestry of warnings and histories. "If we wed," she said, "we join not only bodies but stories. Our marriage will be a second cosmos. It must hold both thunder and law, both desire and restraint." Zeus placed his hands upon the veil, feeling the threadwork tremble with magic. "I swear," he replied, "to uphold you as my equal. I will not cast you aside as my father cast off my mother. I will not devour our children. Your throne will stand beside mine, and your scepter will command the respect of all gods and mortals. The gods bear witness not in courts, but in omens. As Zeus spoke, a mild breeze stirred the needles of the pines. Eagle cries echoed thrice, as if confirming the vow. Hera nodded, not with girlish eagerness, but with regal acceptance. She lifted the veil and draped it over her head, signaling her consent. Zeus took her hand, and together they descended the mountain. Word flew through the halls of Olympus: the king would wed his queen. Iris scattered drops of dew across the world, each one shining in the sun. The fates, those silent spinners, wove a new thread for the union. Hera's consent was not a surrender, but a contract. She would share his bed and his throne, but she would not surrender her pride. In her heart, she planted both love and suspicion. Love would nourish their rule. Suspicion would guard against his whims. Thus did the era of marriage begin on Mount Cithaeron, with vows spoken to pines and eagles, witnessed by no temple but the sky itself. The wedding of Zeus and Hera was not a mortal ceremony with feasting halls and bejeweled guests. It was a cosmic event. The place of celebration itself varied in tales. Some say on Mount Ida in the fragrant wood of Crete. Others claim Samos, Hera's own island, or the slopes of Mount Olympus. Regardless of locale, the essence remained. The gods, titans, nymphs, and personified forces gathered in reverent assembly. Gaia emerged from the earth, more tree than woman, her branches heavy with dew and promise. The Horae, seasons, and the Charites, graces, danced in woven patterns, their footsteps painting the air with perfumes. Hymenaios, the youthful god of marriage song, intoned hymns older than time. Iris draped rainbows across the sky as if it were a temple hall. At the heart of this assembly, Zeus and Hera stood beneath the open heavens. Hera's veil glittered with starlight. Zeus's tunic glowed with lightning woven into linen. Gaia stepped forward, carrying a sapling whose leaves were burnished gold. It gleamed as if it held the sun in each leaf. "Take this tree," she intoned, "and plant it at the edge of the world. Its fruit shall be guarded by my daughters and by Ladon the dragon, until a hero destined by you both claims it." Hera accepted the sapling with both hands. Her eyes widened as she sensed its power. Not just wealth, but immortality. She realized that this gift, like her marriage, was a seed that would one day incite quests and wars. With solemn care, Zeus and Hera placed the sapling into an altar of fresh earth. Ladon, the 100-headed serpent, slithered into position nearby, his eyes glowing like 1,000 torches. The Hesperides, Aegle, Erythea, Hesperia, and Arethusa, took their place around the tree, their voices weaving lullabies to lull the fruit into golden sleep. The chorus of gods raised cups of nectar and golden bowls of ambrosia. They hailed the couple with cheers that rolled like surf on a distant shore. Yet beneath the celebration lay the unspoken weight of obligation. Hera's domain expanded beyond maidenly independence. She was now tied to thunder and lightning, to fertility and law. Her wedding rite bound heaven and earth in a partnership that promised both splendor and strife. No wedding is complete without gifts, and Gaia's present to Hera shaped mythic landscapes for ages. The golden tree, planted at the edge of the world, bore fruit whose glow could not be dimmed by shadow. Hera's eyes glistened at the sight of its delicate blossoms turning to luminous apples. She saw within them both blessing and burden. The apples symbolized her bridal wealth and sovereignty, but they also would be coveted by gods and mortals alike. The Hesperides vowed to guard them, their melodies forming an enchantment around the grove. They were not merely nymphs, they were the dusk embodied, maidens who coaxed the sun below the horizon and sang twilight into being. With them coiled Ladon, massive and insomnious, his multitudinous heads whispering in a language older than man. He watched over each apple as if it were the last star in the sky. The tree was planted in the far west, beyond the river Oceanus, beyond the last known island. Some said it stood upon the slopes of Atlas, the Titan condemned to hold up the heavens. Others claimed it grew in a garden that floated near the edge of creation. The location did not matter. What mattered was the trust. Gaia entrusted her golden daughters to Hera. Hera accepted guardianship, knowing that someday this gift would be weighed in the scales of choice. She could not foresee that Heracles would one day pluck these apples on his labors, nor that Eris would snatch one to sow discord among goddesses. In that moment, though, the golden fruit shone purely, promising abundance. Hera clasped Gaia's hands, bark meeting flesh. "Mother Earth," she said softly, "your gift will remind me of your counsel, to rule with patience." Gaia smiled, though her ancient eyes hinted at storms to come. Nearby, the Charites bound ivy and laurel into wreaths. Hera placed one wreath on Zeus's head, another on her own. Under the branches of the golden tree, vows were sealed. The earth hummed, and the Hesperides songs lulled the west into gentle dusk. No thunder roared. Only Ladon's slow, perpetual hiss echoed into eternity. After the vows and gifts came the time of seclusion. Legends differ. Some say Zeus and Hera withdrew for 300 years. Others speak of a single year's bliss. In the Samian version, their honeymoon unfolded on the island of Samos, where the Imbrasos River sang. The sun glowed soft, the sea lapped gently. They retreated into a grotto draped with ivy, where moonlight filtered through a veil of leaves. There, away from the gaze of other gods, they consummated their union. Time for immortals is fluid. 300 human years might feel like 3 days to them. For mortals, it was as if the world held its breath. No storms ravaged, no new wars ignited. The cosmos simmered in equilibrium. During this era, Zeus revealed himself not as tyrant but as partner. He sat with Hera under pomegranate trees, listening to her recount the stories of their childhood, of Cronus's iron stomach, of Rhea's cunning. He admitted that he had first been drawn to her for her power, but now respected her for her intellect. Hera revealed her dreams of an orderly world, where marriages were sacred and promises unbroken. In the warmth of their grotto, she whispered hopes and fears that she would not voice before a council. Zeus, unarmored by thunder, spoke of the loneliness at the top. They drank from streams that flowed from the earth's core, tasting the mineral sweetness of ancient rivers. They laughed. They argued. They explored each other's scars and strengths. On Samos, it is said that a vine grew, twining around their grotto, its leaves shimmering with dew. It wove them into a secret. To the outside world, their absence signified peace. Hera's brothers and sisters tended their own domains without interference. The Titans, nursing their defeat, did not strike. The sacred nuptial retreat that spanned centuries was a pause between storms, a lull before jealousy would turn love into a blade. In those quiet years, though, the Queen of the Heavens tasted the serenity she would forever chase, and rarely find again. Upon emerging from their secluded bliss, Zeus and Hera returned to Olympus as a united front. The air on the summit quivered with anticipation. The thrones of ivory and gold stood side by side, previously occupied by Zeus alone. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, had tended a sacred flame during their absence, keeping the fire of Olympus alive. Now she stepped forward and placed a torch in Hera's hand. It signified the transfer of domestic authority from maiden goddess to queen. Hera accepted, the flame casting an amber glow across her face. Her eyes reflected not just firelight, but the weight of responsibility. She ascended the steps to her throne, her white robes flowing like river mists. Zeus followed, carrying a scepter of polished wood and metal. He raised it above their heads. "Behold Hera," he declared, his voice echoing off the marble columns and into the clouds. "Queen of the heavens, guardian of marriage, mistress of storm's moderation." The gods and spirits bowed, some sincerely, others calculatingly. In that moment, Hera's diadema, forged by Hephaestus with filigree of gold and adorned with precious stones, flashed like a small constellation. Her scepter, given by Zeus, glinted with celestial engravings. Beside her, a peacock with iridescent feathers strutted, its long tail a cascade of green and blue eyes. The bird, once an ordinary creature of Hera's sacred gardens, would soon gain greater significance. Hermes stood by as herald. Demeter and Hestia, sisters to the queen, watched with pride. Poseidon nodded, though his thoughts drifted to seas and storms. Hades remained in shadow, weighed by his own sovereignty below. The Horae unrolled a canopy of fresh-scented cedar above the thrones, symbolizing the unity of seasons with governance. Themis, the titaness of divine law, whispered blessings upon the order that was being cemented. For Hera, the coronation was not a crowning of love, but of duty. Her seat next to Zeus signified equality in rank, but also constant scrutiny. She would henceforth be both partner and judge to the king of gods, queen of heaven, yet destined to confront his betrayals. While the crowd acclaimed her, Hera felt two sensations ripple through her: pride at her new power and a pang of foreboding. She grasped the scepter more tightly. Thrones shine brightly, but they cast long shadows. Her coronation completed the cosmic tableau. The last daughter of Cronus had taken her place among the ruling 12. The next stories would show how heavy a crown can be. Seated upon their twin thrones, Zeus and Hera turned their attention toward establishing the laws of the new order. The Titans had been subdued, but the world still trembled from recent upheaval. Olympian governance required more than thunder and lightning. Hera, with her meticulous mind, insisted on formal oaths. She summoned the river Styx, whose waters, when invoked, bind even gods. Styx surged up from the underworld, her black waters swirling, her children Zelos, Nike, Kratos, and Bia following. Placing her hand over a bowl filled with the sacred river's water, Hera swore, "Never shall I seek to unseat the rightful ruler of Olympus while he honors his vows." Zeus in turn dipped his fingers and vowed, "Never shall I dishonor the sanctity of marriage before the face of our queen." Themis stood by, nodding at the solemnity of this pact. Mnemosyne, memory herself, recorded it within the fabric of time. The oath was more than ceremony. It was a pillar of divine law. From that day, marriage between gods became binding. Betrayal would not go unanswered. Hera established rights and punishments for those who broke their marital vows. She drew up codes that governed mortal weddings, requiring sacrifices and prayers. She commanded that her temples receive offerings of honey and incense. Zeus accepted these regulations, though he chafed at their restraints. "Do not confuse my mercy with weakness," Hera warned him, her voice carrying the weight of storm and hearth. Her scepter, though lighter than Zeus's thunderbolt, held authority. She began hearing cases between gods, settling disputes with impartiality. Hephaestus, still yet to be thrown from Olympus by Hera's own hand in a future episode, presented her with a throne that responded to her touch alone. Hermes announced her decrees across the earth and sea. In establishing her domain, Hera anchored Olympus in law as much as in power. Yet for all her authority, she sensed cracks under the surface. Zeus's eyes sometimes wandered, lingering on nymphs in the distance. The oath they had sworn would be tested sooner than either expected. For now, though, order reigned. The queen took her place not simply as wife, but as jurist and guardian of vows. Time on Olympus flowed like mountain streams, sometimes rushing, sometimes tranquil. Hera settled into her role with dignity. She presided over marriages, rewarded fidelity, and punished infidelity with punishments that resonated across the cosmos. She listened to Themis's counsel and to Mnemosyne's recollections. Under her guidance, the sanctity of oath took on tangible force. Mortals began to whisper prayers to her before weddings, seeking her blessing. The peacock, once just another bird, became her sacred symbol. Its train, dotted with iridescent eyes, seemed to survey the world for transgressions. Hera could not be everywhere, but the eyes of the peacock reminded mortals that vows were observed. Yet pride, like ivy, can both adorn and choke. Hera's pride grew not only from her position, but from a deep-seated need for control. She could not forget that Zeus had once disguised himself as a cuckoo to deceive her. That memory hardened her heart against future deception. She began to watch her husband with the vigilance of a sentinel. Each time he lingered on the beauty of a nymph, she felt the sting of potential betrayal. Each rumor of his dalliance was a gust that threatened her fragile peace. Hera's pride would not let her show weakness. She reacted with retribution. "If he betrays me," she told herself, "I will make his transgression a lesson to the world." Pride did not blind her to injustice, it sharpened her sense of it. Her punishments often targeted the women involved, a cruel misplacement of blame that has echoed through ages. Some would say her pride became jealousy. Others insist it was the rightful anger of a queen whose throne was constantly tested. In private, Hera wrestled with conflict between her vow to uphold marriage and the knowledge that her husband's nature might never change. She resolved to do everything in her power to protect her dignity. That resolve would soon lead her to Argos, where a priestess named Io served in a temple, unaware that her devotion would pull her into the crossfire of divine pride. In Argos, a city sacred to Hera, lived a maiden named Io. Some called her a priestess of Hera, others a princess, daughter of Inachus, the river god, who wound through the fertile plains. Io's beauty was not ostentatious. It was like the quiet glow of moonlight on olive leaves. She wore simple garments and a diadem of reeds. Her days were spent tending Hera's altar, trimming wicks and pouring libations. She carried herself with humility. Each morning she bathed in the clear waters of the Inachus. Each evening she lit incense, sending tendrils of fragrant smoke to her goddess. Hera, from Olympus, often smiled upon Io, pleased by her devotion. She never imagined the storm that would soon sweep the girl into divine intrigue. Zeus, ever roaming the skies, cast his gaze toward Argos. Perhaps the stillness of Io's ritual lured him like a challenge. He descended as cloud and mist, draping the valley with grey. He watched Io at the temple, her lips moving in silent prayer, her hands arranging offerings. His heart stirred. Was it desire or curiosity? He approached her disguised within the fog, his voice hidden in the wind. Io felt the hair on her arms rise. The temperature dropped. She looked up, seeing shapes in the mist. A presence coalesced before her, tall, shadowy, eyes like flashes of lightning behind gauze. Though she could not see his face clearly, the weight of his charisma pressed upon her. "Do not fear," the cloud whispered. "I have been drawn to your piety. I bring no harm." Io stepped back, confused and frightened. She clutched the altar with one hand. Zeus extended a tendril of mist toward her cheek. "Such devotion deserves reward," he murmured. But in the sacred ground of Hera's temple, Io refused the advances of an unknown presence. She raised her voice in prayer, calling upon Hera for protection. In that moment, thunder rolled. Zeus vanished into cloud again, caught between desire and caution. He knew Hera watched Argos with eagle eyes, so he devised a plan to mask his pursuit. Unfortunately for Io, she would soon become a pawn in this game. Her service, meant to honor the Queen of Heaven, would lead her down a path of unimaginable suffering. Having failed to seduce Io openly, Zeus turned to cunning. He waited for a day when Hera's attention was fixed on some ceremony far from Argos. He returned to Io as a whisper on a cloudless afternoon. Instead of thunderheads, he conjured a soft, golden mist. It drifted like summer haze across the fields, enveloping Io as she carried water from the river. Invisible hands caressed her arms. Unseen lips brushed her neck. Io trembled, her jug spilling. "Who is there?" she cried. The mist thickened, forming the faint outline of a man. Zeus took form inside that haze, eyes smoldering. "It is I," he said, revealing his identity only when Io was too enshrouded to flee. He praised her beauty, her devotion. He swore no harm. He promised blessings. Io, overwhelmed and unable to see beyond the cloud, could not fight. Against her will, Zeus joined with her within that golden fog. In this moment, an act of divine coercion intertwined Io's fate with Hera's wrath. The encounter, though forced and shrouded, was consummation. The earth did not tremble, birds kept singing, but an invisible line had been crossed. As Zeus emerged from the mist, reality snapped back. Io lay on the riverbank, disoriented, her skin damp with dew. She realized something had happened against her will, and she wept. Far away, Hera's senses pricked. The queen had long known her husband's habits. She had developed instincts for his deceptions. She peered into Argos from Olympus and saw the golden mist clinging to the river. Her heart hardened. Without delay, she descended upon Argos in her chariot, drawn by peacocks. The birds' cries cut through the air like sirens, their tails fanned behind her, eyes blazing. Zeus, sensing her approach, panicked. He wrapped Io's form in white light and transformed her into a sleek, white heifer. The cow's large eyes blinked in confusion. Tears rolled down its muzzle. Hera landed and surveyed the scene. A cow stood by the river, trembling. Zeus stood nonchalantly, whistling an innocent tune. Hera narrowed her eyes. "Where is the girl?" she demanded. Zeus shrugged. "I see only a cow," he lied. Hera smiled, a tight, humorless curve. "What a fine cow," she said. "Will you give her to me as a gift?" Zeus had no choice but to comply. He handed Io over to his wife. Beneath the transformation, Io's heart pounded. Her life, once devoted to the goddess, now lay in that goddess's suspicious hands. Hera led the pristine heifer to Argive pastures, still smiling that razor-thin smile. The cow tried to speak, but only lowing emerged. Io's thoughts raced behind her bovine eyes. How would she tell anyone her plight? Hera tethered the cow to an olive tree and considered her next move. She knew her husband's trickery. She suspected this animal was no ordinary beast. But Hera never struck the object of Zeus's interest directly. She chose instead to bind it, to watch and wait. Summoning Argos Panoptes, the giant with 100 eyes, she gave him strict instructions. "Guard this cow, never let her stray. If Zeus approaches in any form, mist, bird, man, do not let him touch her. Your eyes will see what others cannot." Argos nodded. Each eye blinked independently, ensuring he never fully slept. He tethered Io to a rock and began his vigil, his gaze scanning horizon and earth. For Io, life became torture. She could not scratch her own skin with human fingers or speak her truth. She grazed on grass and drank from streams, tears dripping onto clover. Occasionally, Zeus would hover nearby, disguised as cloud or breeze, whispering apologies. "I will find a way to free you," he promised. But words carried on wind offered little comfort. Hera, satisfied that her suspicion was contained, returned to Olympus. Yet she was not content simply to imprison the cow. Anger seeks outlets. She arranged for a gadfly, Oistros, to torment the heifer. The insect buzzed relentlessly, biting Io's flanks and driving her to panic. Io jerked against her tether, eyes rolling. Argos tightened his grip. Zeus fumed, not at himself for causing this suffering, but at Hera for punishing his paramour. He realized he needed an ally cunning enough to outwit Hera's guardian. He thought of Hermes, son of Maia, already known for mischief. While Io paced in misery and Argos dozed between the wakefulness of his many eyes, a new plot was conceived far above. The cow's fate, it seemed, was to wander. But first, she must be freed. Hera's jealousy had turned a human girl into livestock. The next chapter would turn bloodshed into constellation. Argos Panoptes was not born of cruelty. His duty bound him to serve Hera. His 100 eyes scattered across his body like stars across a night sky made him perfect for surveillance. When half of his eyes slept, the other half remained open. No sneaking past him was possible. He sat upon a hillside overlooking the cow, his gaze rotating like a lighthouse. Io, in her new form, lay in the grass. The gadfly buzzed at her tail. Days turned to weeks. Argos recited stories to himself, ancient myths of titans and nymphs to pass the time. He sometimes sang, his deep voice reverberating through the hillside. When he tired, he closed some eyes and opened others. The land around him fell under his watch. Even the shadows seemed to fear him. Zeus watched from above, frustrated. He could not approach Io without waking Argos. He consulted Hermes. The youthful messenger listened with a sly smile. Though Hermes had been born only the day before, the Homeric hymn attests he reached full stature within a single dawn. Thus, he now stood ready to serve Zeus. Hermes was still early in his mischief-making career, but he relished puzzles. "Leave it to me," he said, slipping a reed flute into his belt. At twilight, he descended to Argos, disguised as a shepherd. He leaned on his staff, leaning near the giant, pretending to rest. "Friend," he said, "I see you have a tedious duty. May I sit and play you a tune to pass the time?" Argos, bored and flattered, nodded. Hermes brought out his flute and began to play. The melody was hypnotic, winding, soft, and monotonous. It mimicked the hum of bees and the rustle of leaves. Argos felt his eyes grow heavy. One by one, lids drooped. Hermes modulated the tune to match Argos's breathing. As more eyes closed, the giant's head nodded. Soon, each eye slid shut. Argos slept completely. The 100 guard towers dimmed. Hermes set down the flute and drew a curved sword. In a swift movement, he severed Argos's head. Blood sprang forth, soaking the grass. Hermes wiped his blade, then released the cow from her bonds. "Quickly," he whispered to Io's ear, "run!" Io sprang away, hooves thudding, ears twitching. A moment later, Hera sensed the death of her watchman. She looked down and saw Argos's body lying still, his eyes dark. Rage erupted. Zeus, anticipating her fury, claimed Argos's eyes and presented them to Hera. "A memorial," he said. Hera accepted the eyes, not as a trophy, but as a relic. She placed them upon the tail of her peacock, causing its feathers to shimmer with 100 watchful jewels. Thus Argos's sight continued, not to imprison Io, but to remind the world of Hera's vigilance. Meanwhile, Io began to run, not toward freedom, but toward exile. Freed from Argos's tether, Io bolted across the Argive plain. Her hooves kicked up clods of earth. She aimed for the river Inachus, hoping perhaps to find solace or counsel in her father's waters. But Hera's anger did not fade with Argos's death. It sharpened. She dispatched the gadfly Oistros to pursue the cow. The insect was no ordinary biting fly. It was infused with divine malice. It darted and hovered, its legs stabbing and its proboscis piercing Io's hide. Each sting was a burn. Io bellowed and lashed her tail, but Oistros could not be shaken. Driven to frenzy, she dashed away from the river. Past forests and wheat fields she ran, across hills and marshes. Farmers glimpsed a phantom white cow tearing through their lands. They whispered of an omen from Hera. Inachus, hearing his daughter's distant cries, wept but could not help. The river swelled with his sorrow. Io's flight became a journey that would etch geography with myth. She reached the isthmus and plunged into the strait that separates Europe from Asia. In her honor, it would be called Bosporus, the cow's passage. She swam across, water churning around her. On the far side, she emerged dripping, still tormented by the gadfly. She galloped through Thrace and into the wide expanses of Scythia. Snow dusted the mountains, the wind howled. Oistros bit into her flesh at every pause, driving her on. Io's path carved a line of myth across the world. She did not choose her direction. Hera's insect whip steered her away from safety. Zeus watched, pained. He could not stop Oistros without provoking further wrath. Io's anguish became the suffering mortals must pay when gods wage war, a mute testimony to heavenly pride. She would learn endurance beyond mortal limits. Her flight, though born of jealousy, would eventually intersect with prophecy. At the edge of the world, she would find a voice bound by chains and a promise that her descendants would change everything. But for now, the gadfly stung, the cow ran, and Hera's eyes glittered on a peacock's tail. Before Io reached the ends of the earth, Zeus realized he needed to remove Hera's punishment, or at least alleviate her torment. Hera's wrath could not be confronted directly without tearing the fragile peace of Olympus. Only subterfuge could help. Hermes, fresh from severing Argos's head, volunteered again. The young god had a talent for persuasion and theft that no one else possessed. "I cannot kill a gadfly the way I killed Argos," Hermes told Zeus, "but I can distract Hera. Give me leave to wander in other guises." Zeus agreed, albeit reluctantly. Hermes descended upon earth, weaving through the fields and towns, whispering in the ears of shepherds and merchants. He played songs on his lyre about Hera's glory and Zeus's generosity. He helped travelers, solved minor disputes, delivered dreams to sleeping villagers that portrayed Io as a holy cow under Hera's protection, not a fleeing paramour. In this way, he shifted the narrative. Mortals began offering prayers to Hera on Io's behalf, believing the cow's suffering honored the goddess. The logic was twisted, but it pleased Hera. Her anger cooled to a simmer. She withdrew Oistros temporarily, allowing Io to rest. Hermes' role was not to free Io directly, but to mitigate Hera's fury by flattering her and reinforcing her image as a just queen. Meanwhile, Hermes visited Io in dreams. As she slept on a step, her hooves tucked beneath her, he appeared not as a man, but as a voice that rustled through grass. "Hold fast," the wind whispered. "Your wandering will end in a land of black earth and green reeds. There, Zeus will restore your form, and your son will be mighty." Io's ears twitched. Her mind latched onto the promise. Though she could not speak, she carried the words in her heart. The gadfly would return, but its stings would no longer break her. Hermes' stratagem did not confront Hera head-on. Instead, it slipped beyond the reach of her all-seeing eyes. In doing so, he maintained a semblance of harmony on Olympus. The trickster's dual allegiance, to Zeus and to mischief, began to define his role among gods. As for Io, the respite would soon end. Her path led inexorably to a mountain where chains clanged, and a titan awaited with counsel of his own. Argos' death did not fade into legend quietly. Hera immortalized his service and her own vigilance. After Hermes presented her with the severed head's eyes, she turned them into adornment. Each eye, still bright even in death, was set upon the long emerald tail feathers of her favored bird. The peacock, once a humble creature, now carried the memory of Argos in its plumage. Whenever its tail unfurled, myriad eyes stared in every direction. No detail escaped them. Mortals saw the bird and whispered, "Hera sees all." Peacocks strutted through her temples and gardens, their cries echoing under marble colonnades. Hera stroked their feathers, taking comfort in the vigilant eyes. They reminded her that, though one guardian had fallen, she could still watch over her domain. The presence of Argos's eyes on the peacock's tail served as both memorial and warning. To Zeus, it was a subtle threat. "I will always be looking." Peacocks soon became symbols of immortality and pride. Their tail feathers decorated Hera's statues and the scepter she held. Artists carved peacock motifs into temple friezes, linking Argos's loyalty to Hera's majesty. Beyond aesthetics, the eyes also signified her jealousy. Each one glinted with suspicion. When Zeus glanced at a nymph or goddess, he felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon him. The eyes followed Io across the world. They later watched Semele in Thebes and Alcmena in Tiryns. Hera's vigilant gaze became part of the fabric of myth. In time, mortals would interpret the peacock as a symbol of vanity, but originally it was a badge of vigilance and grief. Argos's story did not end with his death. Constellations tell of his reward. Zeus, perhaps to pacify Hera or to honor Argos's service, placed the giant's form among the stars. Some myths say he became the star guardian of the night sky, his eyes twinkling across the Milky Way. Others claim his 100 eyes were scattered, forming new stars. Either way, his vigilance continued beyond death. On Earth, the peacock spread its tail. In the heavens, Argos glittered. Hera retained his watchfulness in both realms. The queen of the gods, though betrayed, ensured no future deception would go unseen. Driven by Oistros and by prophecy, Io continued her wanderings. After crossing the Bosporus, she traversed mountains and steppes. She traveled through snow and heat, through lands where no Greek had yet set foot. Her hooves became cracked, her breath ragged. Wolves eyed her from afar but did not approach. Something divine warded them off. She crossed into the land of the Scythians, where nomads roamed. Herdsmen saw the white cow and considered her sacred. They approached with reverence, offering her water from wooden bowls. She drank gratefully, though she could not speak. They whispered among themselves that she might be a goddess in disguise. One elderly woman laid flowers on her horns. Io's eyes brimmed with tears. She longed to tell them who she was, to ask for help, but only a lowing sound escaped. From Scythia, Oistros drove her southward, toward the far Caucasus mountains. Snow-capped peaks loomed, valleys echoed with the cries of eagles. As Io climbed rocky paths, she noticed a figure bound to the mountainside. A man naked and gaunt, his flesh torn by a great eagle, his wounds healing only to be reopened. She recognized him from temple tales. Prometheus, the titan who had stolen fire for humankind and now suffered eternal punishment. Despite his agony, his eyes were bright with defiance. Io approached cautiously, hooves clacking on stone. Prometheus lifted his head and saw the cow. At first he laughed bitterly at the absurdity. A woman transformed, a titan chained, both victims of Zeus. But then he noticed the desperation in Io's gaze. In that moment, he forsook bitterness and offered what he could, words. "Daughter of Inachus," he rasped, recognizing her despite her form. "You have suffered at the hands of gods. Hera's sting will drive you further yet. But your torment will not be endless. You will reach the land where the Nile divides the earth, and there you will bear a son named Epaphus. From him will descend heroes greater than any king, and from your line will come the one who will free me." Io's ears pricked. The prophecy lodged within her like a warming ember. Prometheus continued, "Endure, Io. The path of exile is the seed of liberation." Io mooed softly in gratitude and pressed her muzzle to his foot in a gesture of solidarity. She could not free him. She could not free herself, but their suffering bound them. She turned away, renewed by promise. Behind her, the eagle descended again on Prometheus, but his eyes glowed with newfound hope. Io descended the mountain and ran toward the south, toward a land of reeds and crocodiles, guided not by Oistros alone, but by destiny. The encounter with Prometheus lingered in Io's mind as she continued. His prophecy gave her a destination, Egypt. But first, she had to survive the rest of the Caucasus. Snow gave way to rock, then to desert. Days blurred, nights froze. The gadfly returned, stinging ferociously at times, easing at others. Each sting reminded her of Hera's gaze. Each pause signaled Zeus's pity. She understood now that she was a piece on a board of divine pride. Her only power lay in endurance. As she trotted through mountain passes, she looked back once at the peak where Prometheus's silhouette still hung. She thought of his pain. If she reached Egypt and bore the promised son, she could help free him indirectly. Her suffering gained purpose. She would become an ancestor of the man who would end the Titan's torment. Thus, Io's pain was woven into the fabric of future heroism. On the other side of the Caucasus, Io entered lands inhabited by the Cimmerians, then the land of the Hyperboreans, though some say she veered directly toward the Levant. Wherever she moved, rivers and cities would later bear names connected to her. In the region near the mouth of the Nile, she rested under a sycamore fig. The tree's shade cooled her feverish hide. There, Zeus approached once more, this time openly. He brushed his hand over her back, and white hair fell away. Limbs stretched, bones reshaped, flesh realigned. Io's face, once bovine, reformed into human features. She rose to her hands and knees, then to her feet. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Io," Zeus murmured, "forgive me. Your trials end here." She wanted to rage against him, to strike him, to curse him, but exhaustion overpowered anger. She shook. He reached out, but she stepped back. He nodded, accepting her distance. "In this land you will be queen," he said. "You will bear my son and name him Epaphus, for I touched you once in mercy." Io did not reply. She gazed across the Nile delta. Reeds swayed, ibis waded, crocodiles sunned themselves. There she would make a life. Zeus left, his shadow long on the sand. Some myths suggest that Io later married the Egyptian king Telegonus, or that she was worshipped as Isis. Variations abound. The core remains. Io regained her humanity in Egypt and bore Epiphus, founder of the line that would produce Danaus and Hypermnestra, and eventually Heracles, who freed Prometheus. Thus the circle closed. Hera, though still seething, turned her attention elsewhere. Io's wandering ended, but the memory of her suffering endured in place names and riverbanks. The Bosporus, Ionian Sea, Ionian Gulf, these waters echo her path. The gadfly, now bereft of purpose, buzzed aimlessly. And in a cave on the Caucasus, Prometheus waited, hopeful. As Io adjusted to her new life on Egyptian soil, she marveled at the black silt of the Nile. Unlike the brown earth of Argos, papyrus rustled in the breeze, lotus blossoms opened at dawn. The people of the Delta looked at her with a mixture of reverence and curiosity. They saw a foreign woman with a glow of divinity. Some, believing she was a goddess, fell to their knees. Others offered bread and beer. Io accepted their kindness, but remained distant. She carried too much trauma to become a deity in the minds of strangers. Nevertheless, her story wove into the fabric of Egyptian religion. Some say she became Isis, the great mother goddess, though Greek and Egyptian traditions remain distinct. At the very least, the Greeks identified Io with Isis later, merging their myths. In Egypt, Io gave birth to a son, Epaphus. His skin was darkened by the sun, his eyes bright with inherited lightning. Zeus appeared only briefly, blessing the child. Hera begrudgingly allowed this. Epaphus grew under Io's care, becoming king of the land. Through him, the line of Zeus extended beyond Greece. His descendants would marry into both Greek and Egyptian lines, bridging cultures. Epaphus later wed Memphis or Cassiopeia, depending on the tale, and fathered Libya. Libya bore twin sons, Belus and Agenor. Belus became father of Danaus and Aegyptus. Agenor fathered Cadmus and Europa. Thus, Io's blood flowed into the veins of many heroes and queens. The far-reaching genealogies of Greek myth often trace back to this wandering cow and her Egyptian son. Prometheus's prophecy that Io's descendants would free him came true generations later, when Heracles, son of Zeus and a mortal woman, climbed Mount Caucasus and slew the eagle tormenting the Titan. In that moment, Io's suffering bore fruit. Journey to Egypt was not just physical, it was generational. Through Egypt, Io entered mythic history not as a victim, but as ancestress. Her name lingered on the lips of storytellers from Memphis to Argos. When travelers asked why the river mouth was called the Canopic branch, or why a certain festival involved whipping women with thongs of goat hide, priests would begin, "Once there was a cow. The journey ended, but the story never did." While Io's tale unfolded in one arc of the cosmos, another narrative began far west on the shores of Phoenicia. Europa, daughter of Agenor and Telephassa, or of Phoenix, enjoyed her days by the Mediterranean. She often played with her maidens under the watchful eyes of Sidon's harbor towers. One night, a dream visited her. Two continents appeared as women. Asia, in richly embroidered robes, claimed Europa as her own because Europa was born there. A second woman, unnamed but radiant, vowed that Zeus would give Europa to her. Disturbed, Europa sought counsel from her father, but dreams were not easily interpreted. She returned to the beach, hoping to clear her mind. As she gathered flowers, a magnificent bull appeared on the shore. Its hide was white as salt, its horns curved gracefully like the crescent moon. It knelt gently, inviting her to mount. Unlike other bulls, it smelled of nectar, not musk. Europa, fearless and charmed, climbed onto its back, believing it was a tame beast gifted by Poseidon. Zeus, of course, had taken this shape. He had watched Europa from Olympus, drawn by her laughter and beauty. Knowing Hera's jealousy, he dared not appear to Europa as himself. Instead, he disguised himself as the bull, knowing that Hera rarely looked upon cattle with suspicion after Io. Europa stroked the bull's smooth flank. Her fingers sank into fur as soft as clouds. She smiled at her friends and urged them to join her, but the bull shook its head and began to walk toward the sea. Europa laughed, thinking it a game. Her laughter faded as the bull's hooves touched the water, then deeper still. Waves lapped at her ankles, then her thighs. Her maidens cried out. "Do not fear," the bull's voice whispered into her mind, not with words, but with reassurance. The animal swam powerfully, his horns cutting through waves. Europa clung to his back, frightened, yet enthralled. She could not jump without drowning. She held fast. Behind her, the shores of Sidon shrank. Ahead lay open sea and the island of Crete, where Zeus planned to reveal himself and father kings. Europa's dream had been a warning disguised as prophecy. She would leave Asia for an unknown land, guided by Zeus, disguised as an animal. Hera, consumed by other jealousies at that moment, did not intervene. Europa's fate would intertwine with the founding of a civilization, and with tales to come. The Mediterranean glittered beneath the noonday sun, its surface patterned with foam and fish. Europa clung to the bull's back, her arms wrapped around his neck. The bull's strength was immense. Each stroke of his legs propelled them farther from shore. Salt spray coated Europa's lips. Her heart pounded, but a strange calm settled over her. The bull did not buck or thrash. He swam smoothly, his movements steady as a heartbeat. She saw dolphins leap beside them, escorting them as if part of the procession. Nereids, sea nymphs with hair of seaweed and eyes the color of deep waters, surfaced, singing a song of welcome. They placed wreaths of coral on the bull's horns and wove shells into Europa's hair. The bull angled his head toward them. Though he could not speak without revealing his identity, his eyes glowed with affection for his daughters and cousins. Europa's fear dissipated in the presence of the Nereids. She felt protected, almost honored. The sea seemed to conspire in her abduction. Poseidon, god of the sea and Zeus's brother, perhaps approved of this union, or at least did not hinder it. After a time that felt both endless and instantaneous, land appeared on the horizon. The island of Crete, dominated by Mount Ida and Mount Dicte. Its shores were rugged, its groves dense. The bull surged toward a secluded beach. As soon as hooves touched sand, Zeus let the bull's form dissolve. Europa slid off and stumbled backward. Before her stood a god in his radiance, his hair dripping seawater and sunlight. At first, Europa was terrified. She fell to her knees. Zeus gently lifted her, explaining who he was and why he had brought her. He promised her honor, not disgrace. He spoke of marriage or of loving union. Variations exist, and of the children she would bear. Minos, who would become king, Rhadamanthus, destined to judge souls, and Sarpedon, who would become an honored king in distant Lycia. He promised that Crete would honor her name. Europa listened, caught between outrage at being kidnapped and awe at the god's presence. She could not return to Sidon. Her destiny lay here. Zeus took her to the Dictaean cave, where a couch of hyacinths awaited. Above, the cypress trees whispered. Below, the future of Crete stirred. Hera, far away, felt a twinge of suspicion, but her attention was still locked on Io and other matters. Europa's story unfolded unchallenged, for now. After the union on the Cretan shore, Zeus realized he could not remain with Europa. His presence would attract Hera's gaze. He entrusted the princess to the care of Asterion, or Asterius, the wise king of Crete. Asterion was childless and welcomed the girl as a daughter and then as a queen. He married her, raising her children as his own. Europa adapted to her new homeland. She learned the language and rituals. She wandered through olive groves and learned the scent of thyme and sage. She gave birth to 3 sons, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon. Minos would inherit the throne, guided by a white bull from the sea sent by Poseidon, though he would later anger the sea god by refusing to sacrifice the bull. Rhadamanthus would become famed for his justness, eventually appointed as a judge in the underworld. Sarpedon would rule Lycia and fight bravely in the Trojan War. Europa's name became attached not only to the continent she left behind, but to the identity of her new land. Coins later minted by Cretan kings bore her image riding a bull. Her abduction, though traumatic, was transformed by myth into a founding story, a legitimization of Cretan kingship. Greek poets and storytellers would recite her tale as both cautionary and celebratory. Cautionary about trusting beautiful animals, and celebratory about the merging of cultures. Across the Mediterranean, Agenor and his sons searched for Europa. Phoenix and Cilix went east and north. Cadmus journeyed far west and eventually founded Thebes. Their search would populate many myths. Hera, upon learning of Europa's abduction, seethed. But by the time she discovered Zeus's role, Europa had already borne his sons and integrated into Cretan life. Hera had to choose her battles. She decided not to punish Europa. Instead, she stored the memory. Later, she would unleash her wrath on other lovers more severely, perhaps because she spared Europa. The crossing of the sea had carried the princess from one world to another. It also carried her name from myth to geography. When Greeks later spoke of Europe, they echoed the girl whose dream predicted her fate, a continent that would, in time, challenge the gods themselves. Europa's life on Crete settled into rhythm. Asterion honored her as queen. The islanders, a mixture of indigenous peoples and immigrants, revered her. She oversaw festivals dedicated to local gods and to Zeus. Cretan women came to her for advice on childbirth and family. Men sought her judgment in disputes. She told stories to her sons of Phoenician customs, how to weave purple dye from murex shells, how to dance to the rhythm of drums and flutes. In turn, she learned Cretan myths about the Earth Mother and the Bull of the Sea. She listened to songs about Rhea hiding baby Zeus in a cave, guarded by curetes whose clashing shields drowned out his cries. She visited that cave, touching its cold limestone walls. She realized she slept in the same place where the King of Gods had once hidden. That knowledge connected her intimately to divine lineage. Europa's sons grew like olive trees, straight and resilient. Minos showed ambition early. He argued with his brothers over games and responsibilities. Rhadamanthus mediated. Sarpedon looked toward the sea, dreaming of adventures beyond Crete. Europa loved them all fiercely. When Asterion died, Europa's sons contested the succession. According to some accounts, Sarpedon and Rhadamanthus were exiled, leaving Minos to claim the throne. Minos prayed to Poseidon for a sign that he was the rightful heir. Poseidon sent a snow-white bull from the sea, which Minos should have sacrificed. He did not, leading to punishment that would spawn the Minotaur and other tragedies. These events, though outside our current episode, have roots in Europa's story. Hera, watching from Olympus, noted Zeus's enduring influence through his children. So it is the princess of Tyre, of blood born of the sea, who now distracts him, Hera muttered, her voice cold as polished bronze. She also noted that Europa did not suffer as Io had. Perhaps Hera spared her, because Zeus disguised himself not as mist, but as a bull, an animal now sacred to Poseidon. Or perhaps Hera believed that Europa was necessary for future events. Regardless, Europa's fate contrasted with Io's. One became queen, the other wandered as a cow. The gods, capricious in judgment, dispensed mercy and punishment with little pattern. Europa's story added complexity to Hera's jealousy. The Queen of Heaven could not strike every lover. She had to choose. With Europa, she chose to wait. Later, she would make up for it with fierce vengeance upon Semele and Alcmena. While Hera's wrath largely spared Europa, it hovered like a storm cloud over other women destined to attract Zeus. One of these women was Semele, a princess of Thebes, daughter of Cadmus and Harmonia. Semele's story belongs to a later episode focused on Dionysus, but its seed appears here as a glimmer. Cadmus wandered far from Phoenicia, searching for his sister Europa. He did not find her, but he founded Thebes. There, he married Harmonia, daughter of Ares and Aphrodite. Their daughter, Semele, grew into a woman of striking beauty and piety. She often visited the banks of the Asopus River, singing hymns to the gods. Zeus noticed. Some say he first saw her while disguised as an eagle. Others say he was drawn by her voice. He approached her in the guise of a mortal, whispering sweet promises. They lay together. Hera, sensing a pattern she recognized, watched. Jealousy flared. She decided to wait until Semele became pregnant before she struck. Jealousy thrives on timing. Hera was patient when necessary. Semele's glimmer in this episode is not an invention. It is a setup. We see Hera's mind begin to plot. She visits old women in disguise to sow doubt. She whispers to them, "If a man claims to be Zeus, make him prove it." Semele, gullible and in love, later falls victim to this suggestion, but at this point she is still singing by rivers, unaware that her life is about to be intertwined with lightning. Hera's jealousy is not uniform. It chooses targets based on potential impact. Semele will carry a child who will disrupt order, Dionysus. Hera understands the threat. Thus, even as she hunts Io, charms Europa, and watches Zeus's roving eye, she prepares a plan for Semele. Her glimmer in this episode is a warning. Jealousy can be slow-moving, like a serpent coiling before striking. When Hera strikes, it will be lethal. Though the full tale of Semele belongs to another episode, we must mention the Spark of Dionysus here, because it aligns with Hera's brewing jealousy. After Zeus lay with Semele, she conceived. She cherished the secret, but whispers reached Hera. Jealousy, fed by memory of Io's flight and Europa's abduction, turned to resolve. She disguised herself as an old nurse and visited Semele. The queen coaxed the young woman into revealing that she had lain with a man who claimed to be Zeus. Hera feigned disbelief. "Dearest, many men claim to be gods. How do you know he is truly Zeus?" she asked, voice dripping sweet concern. "If he is truly the king of heaven, make him appear in his true form." Semele, naive, promised to do so. Later, when Zeus came to her chamber, she asked him to swear by the river Styx to grant her a favor. He agreed, thinking she might request a gift. She demanded to see him in his full, divine glory. Zeus begged her to reconsider. Mortals cannot behold a god's true form and live, but his oath bound by Styx could not be broken. Reluctantly, he revealed himself as thunder, lightning, and burning radiance. Semele was consumed by flame. Zeus leapt forward and snatched the unborn child from her womb, sewing him into his thigh. That child was Dionysus, who would later challenge Hera's authority by inspiring madness and ecstasy. For Hera, this event was a partial victory. She eliminated a rival and prevented Semele from enjoying motherhood. Yet, like many of Hera's punishments, it backfired. Dionysus survived and became one of the 12 Olympians, albeit after initial exile. Hera would later attempt to destroy him through other means, sending madness and opposition his way. In our current episode, we include the Spark of Dionysus to show how Hera's jealousy works in advance. While Io wanders and Europa settles, Hera invests energy into a plan against a future lover. Her jealousy is both reactive and proactive. It shapes the destinies of gods and mortals across decades. The Spark of Dionysus foreshadows the chaos he will embody. Chaos that will test Hera's rigid sense of order. For now, though, the seed is planted. Hera smiles as she thinks of Semele's inevitable doom, even as she nurses a peacock in her lap. Another thread in Hera's tapestry of jealousy is Alcmena, a princess of Mycenae or Tiryns. Her story, like Semele's, belongs to a later episode about Heracles. Nevertheless, Hera's reaction begins here. Alcmena was famed for her virtue and beauty. She was married to Amphitryon, a prince who accidentally killed his uncle and sought purification. He left to avenge Alcmena's brothers, promising to consummate their marriage only after success. Zeus, seeing an opportunity, disguised himself as Amphitryon and spent a night with Alcmena, prolonging the darkness to 3 nights. Hera learned of this deception. Rage ignited. Yet she did not immediately punish Alcmena. She plotted to thwart the birth of the child conceived that night, Heracles. When Alcmena went into labor, Hera sat beside Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, and forbade her from assisting. She sent snakes to the newborn's cradle when he eventually was born. She delayed the birth so long that Eurystheus, a descendant of Sthenelus, was born first, and thus inherited the throne of Mycenae, to which Heracles might have been heir. These actions would come later, but the seed of jealousy germinated now. Hera, always watchful, took note of the night Zeus spent in Alcmena's bed. In this episode, we mention Alcmena not to narrate her entire story, but to show Hera's long memory. While Io ran Europa crossed seas and Semele sang, Hera catalogued each transgression. Hera balanced her reprisals as the guardian of every offense never forgotten, recording slights with unwavering precision. Each woman would receive her due. Io turned into a cow. Semele burned. Alcmena would suffer in childbirth and watch her son endure labors. Hera's jealousy, though sometimes justified as defense of marital fidelity, often misdirected itself toward the women rather than the root cause, Zeus. Why did she not punish him? Perhaps she feared destabilizing Olympus. Perhaps she hoped to change him. Perhaps the myths reflect cultural attitudes that punished women for male desire. In any case, the shadow of Alcmena stretches across this episode, a future echo. Hera sits on her throne, the eyes of her peacock glinting, mentally adding names to her ledger. She knows she cannot stop Zeus. She can only react. Each reaction shapes a myth. Alcmena's name is written. The storm awaits. The marriage of Zeus and Hera marked the formal establishment of cosmic order, yet it planted seeds of discord that would sprout across continents and generations. Hera received her scepter, diadema, and golden apples. She presided as queen, upholding vows and punishing transgressions. Her vigilance gave the peacock its eyes and Argos its constellation. Yet her pride turned to jealousy as Zeus continued his affairs. Io was transformed, tormented by Oistros, and forced to wander from Argos to Egypt. In her suffering, she met Prometheus and gained a prophecy that linked her to the liberator of Titans. She gave birth to Epaphus in Egypt, weaving Greek and Egyptian myth. Europa, abducted as a bull ride across the sea, became Queen of Crete and mother of Minos. Hera spared her but stored resentment. Semele conceived a future god only to be tricked by Hera's disguise and burned by divine glory. Alcmena awaited a long labor and a son destined for trials. Each woman's story revealed a different facet of Hera's reaction: outright vengeance, delayed retribution, or strategic patience. Zeus's vows to respect Hera were repeatedly strained. Hera's oaths to uphold marriage were repeatedly tested. In this dance of fidelity and betrayal, the gods displayed very human flaws writ large. Hera's jealousy, though cast in negative light by some, anchored her sense of justice. She defended the sanctity of marriage, even as she sometimes punished the wrong individuals. Through her actions, she influenced geography, Bosporus, Europe, genealogies, the lines of Minos and Heracles, and future events, the birth of Dionysus. She also introduced a pattern: mortal women who consorted with gods often faced suffering, while their divine lovers largely escaped punishment. This imbalance highlights the asymmetry of divine and mortal power and the different fates of men and women in myth. As the episode closes, Hera sits on her golden throne, scepter in hand, eyes scanning the world through her peacock's tail. The storm of jealousy has only begun. In the next episode, the focus will shift to Hephaestus and the vengeance of the rejected. Yet the echoes of Hera's wrath will linger. The golden apples will tempt, the Hesperides will guard. The names Io and Europa will become geographical and cultural markers. The Queen of Heaven has taken her seat, but the throne is built on tempestuous clouds. Subscribe for more epic journeys. Visit myth2myth.com and discover all our products.